The morning sun peeked through the large windows of O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, casting soft golden rays across the bustling terminal. People rushed to their gates, dragging suitcases behind them, while others stood in long lines for coffee or checked their phones for updates on their flights. Among the crowd was Marcus Johnson, a 17-year-old boy with dark brown eyes and a calm demeanor. He wore a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Today was special. He was flying alone to Los Angeles to spend a week with his grandmother. Marcus had never been particularly excited about airplanes, but this trip felt different. It wasn't just about seeing Grandma. It was also his first solo journey. His parents had dropped him off earlier that morning, reminding him to stay safe, keep his phone charged, and call as soon as he landed. As he walked toward Gate 23, he couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and excitement. Everything seemed so big: the planes, the crowds, the endless corridors of the airport. When boarding began, Marcus handed his ticket to the gate agent with a polite smile and stepped onto the jet bridge. The narrow hallway led him into the plane, where rows of seats stretched out before him. Finding his assigned spot near the window, he settled in, placing his backpack under the seat in front of him. Across the aisle sat an older couple, Linda and Gary, who were deep in conversation about their upcoming vacation in Santa Monica. Their laughter filled the space around them, adding a sense of warmth to the otherwise sterile environment. As more passengers boarded, the cabin grew louder. Children giggled, adults chatted, and flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, helping stow luggage and pointing people toward their seats. One of these attendants was Rachel Dawson, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. She had worked for Delta Airlines for over 20 years and prided herself on maintaining order during every flight. To Rachel, rules weren't suggestions, they were commands. And today, she intended to enforce them without hesitation. Once everyone was seated, Rachel stood at the front of the cabin, going through the usual safety demonstration. Her voice was clear and commanding, though some passengers barely paid attention, absorbed in their own worlds. Marcus listened carefully, watching the instructions on the screen above him. When it came time to secure all belongings, he double-checked that his backpack was tucked neatly away. Still, something caught Rachel's eye, a slight bulge sticking out from beneath the seat in front of Marcus. Rachel approached him with brisk steps, her heels clicking against the floor. "Excuse me," she said sharply, startling Marcus. "You need to make sure your bag is completely under the seat." Marcus blinked, surprised by her tone. "Oh, sorry," he replied softly, leaning forward to push the backpack further underneath. "I didn't realize it was sticking out." But Rachel didn't soften. Instead, she crossed her arms and gave him a stern look. "We can't have anything blocking the aisles. It's important to follow instructions." Her words hung in the air, heavy and judgmental. Marcus nodded quickly, feeling a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. He was just trying to get comfortable. But Rachel's glare lingered, making him wish he could disappear into his seat. Across the aisle, Linda glanced at Gary, raising an eyebrow. "That seems a bit harsh, doesn't it?" she whispered. Gary shrugged, unsure of what to say. A few rows ahead, a young woman named Emily Taylor turned slightly in her seat, observing the exchange with concern. Emily was in her early 30s, dressed in professional attire, and had been traveling for work. Something about Rachel's demeanor struck her as unnecessarily aggressive. The tension eased momentarily as the plane began its taxi to the runway. Engines roared to life, vibrating through the cabin, and Marcus tried to focus on calming himself. He slipped on his headphones, letting music drown out the noise around him. Outside the window, the ground rolled by as the aircraft prepared for takeoff. For a brief moment, everything felt normal again. However, Rachel wasn't done yet. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, she resumed her duties, serving drinks and snacks to passengers. When she reached Marcus's row, she accidentally spilled soda onto his tray table. The liquid spread quickly, soaking into a book he'd brought along for the flight. Marcus looked up startled and waited for an apology. But instead of saying sorry, Rachel muttered under her breath, "Be careful next time." His heart sank. Was she blaming him for the spill? Before he could respond, she hurried away, leaving the mess untouched. Feeling frustrated, Marcus raised his hand slightly, calling after her. "Excuse me, could I get a napkin?" Rachel stopped mid-step and turned back, her expression hardening. "If you'd kept your things organized, this wouldn't have happened," she snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Emily leaned forward now, unable to ignore the situation. "Is everything okay here?" she asked gently, addressing both Marcus and Rachel. Rachel shot her a dismissive glance. "It's fine, just doing my job." Then she walked away, leaving Marcus red-faced and humiliated. Passengers around them exchanged uneasy looks, sensing that something was off. Some sympathized with Marcus, while others remained silent, unsure of how to react. For Marcus, the rest of the flight promised to be anything but smooth. Little did he know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that would affect not only him but everyone on board. What started as a routine journey was about to become something far more complicated and unforgettable. The tension in the cabin didn't fade after Rachel's sharp words. Marcus sat stiffly in his seat, staring out the window, trying to ignore the heat of embarrassment still burning in his cheeks. The music playing through his headphones did little to drown out the voices in his head. Rachel's harsh tone, the murmurs of nearby passengers, and even the faint sound of his own heartbeat. He felt exposed, like everyone on the plane was watching him, judging him. But what bothered him most was the unfairness of it all. He hadn't done anything wrong. Why was she treating him this way? Across the aisle, Linda whispered something to Gary, her brow furrowed with concern. "That poor kid," she said softly, glancing at Marcus. "Did you see how rude she was? It's not right." Gary nodded but kept his voice low. "Yeah, but you know how some people are when they're stressed. Maybe she's just having a bad day." "A bad day doesn't give her the right to talk to someone like that," Linda replied firmly. She turned slightly in her seat, looking around to see if anyone else shared her frustration. A few rows ahead, Emily Taylor was still watching the situation unfold, her expression thoughtful. Something about Rachel's behavior didn't sit well with her. It wasn't just impatience, it seemed personal, almost targeted. Meanwhile, Marcus tried to focus on calming down. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that the flight would be over soon and he could put this behind him. But then Rachel returned, pushing her beverage cart down the aisle. When she stopped near Marcus's row, he tensed up, bracing for another confrontation. Sure enough, she looked directly at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir," she said loudly, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "I need you to keep your tray table upright during turbulence. It's for your safety." Marcus blinked, confused. His tray table was already upright. He'd made sure of it after cleaning up the soda spill earlier. Before he could respond, Rachel pointed at his backpack, which had shifted slightly under the seat in front of him. "And make sure your belongings are secure. We can't have anything loose in the cabin." Her tone was clipped, almost accusatory, as if she expected him to argue. Marcus clenched his fists beneath the armrests, biting back the urge to snap at her. Instead, he leaned forward again, adjusting his backpack carefully. "It's fine now," he said quietly, avoiding eye contact. But Rachel wasn't satisfied. "If I have to remind you again, there will be consequences," she warned, her voice carrying further than necessary. Passengers craned their necks to see what was happening, curiosity mixing with discomfort. Some exchanged glances while others pretended not to notice, burying themselves in books or phones. Emily couldn't stay silent any longer. Leaning forward in her seat, she addressed Rachel calmly but firmly. "Excuse me, ma'am. Is everything okay here?" "He seems to be following instructions." Rachel's jaw tightened. "This is between me and the passenger," she replied curtly, dismissing Emily with a wave of her hand. "Please don't interfere." Emily hesitated, unsure whether to press the issue. She glanced at Marcus, who looked miserable, his shoulders hunched and his face pale. She wanted to say more, to tell Rachel that her attitude was uncalled for, but she didn't want to escalate things further. Instead, She leaned back in her seat, shaking her head in disbelief. For Marcus, the constant scrutiny felt suffocating. Every movement he made seemed to invite criticism from Rachel, no matter how small or innocent. He started second-guessing himself, wondering if he really was doing something wrong. Was his backpack sticking out too far? Had he accidentally bumped the seat in front of him? The questions swirled in his mind, making it hard to concentrate on anything else. As the flight continued, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. Rachel moved on to assist other passengers, but her presence loomed large over Marcus. Even when she wasn't nearby, he could feel her eyes on him, watching for mistakes. It was exhausting. Finally, unable to take it anymore, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for, his Uncle Derek's office. Derek Lawson was a lawyer known for his work in civil rights cases, and Marcus trusted him completely. With trembling fingers, Marcus dialed the number, holding the phone close to his ear. "Hello?" came a professional voice on the other end. "Uncle Derek?" Marcus asked hesitantly. "It's Marcus. I need your help." Derek's tone immediately softened. "Marcus, what's going on? Are you okay?" Marcus hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening too closely. "I'm on a plane," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's this flight attendant. She keeps yelling at me for no reason. She spilled soda on my stuff and blamed me for it, and now she won't leave me alone. I think it's because I'm black." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Derek's voice hardened slightly, though he remained calm. "Tell me exactly what happened step by step." So Marcus recounted the events, starting with the initial confrontation about his backpack and ending with Rachel's latest warning. As he spoke, he felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because finally, someone was listening. Frustration because he shouldn't have to explain why he was being treated unfairly. When Marcus finished, Derek exhaled slowly. "Okay, Marcus, listen to me. Stay calm and don't engage with her anymore. Let me handle this. I'll call the airline right now and let them know what's happening. You're not alone in this." Marcus nodded, even though Derek couldn't see him. "Thanks, Uncle Derek. I don't know what else to do." "You've done the right thing by calling me," Derek reassured him. "Now sit tight and try to focus on getting through the rest of the flight. I'll take care of the rest." After hanging up, Marcus leaned back in his seat, feeling a strange combination of hope and dread. He knew Derek would fight for him, but he also knew that confronting authority figures rarely ended well. Would the airline listen, or would they side with Rachel, brushing off his complaints as an overreaction? Unbeknownst to Marcus, Derek wasted no time. Within minutes, he contacted Delta Airlines headquarters demanding answers. His reputation preceded him, and the executives took his call seriously. Derek explained the situation in detail, emphasizing the racial undertones of Rachel's behavior and insisting that immediate action be taken. By the time he hung up, wheels were already turning within the company. Back on the plane, Rachel noticed Marcus on his phone and approached him once more. "Sir," she said sharply, "you're not allowed to use your device during the flight unless it's in airplane mode. Please comply with the rules." Marcus looked up at her, his heart pounding. "It's in airplane mode," he replied evenly, showing her the screen to prove it. "I'm not breaking any rules." Rachel studied the phone for a moment before stepping back, clearly irritated. She muttered something under her breath and walked away, leaving Marcus shaken but determined. Whatever happened next, he knew he had support, and that gave him strength. The remaining hours of the flight passed in uneasy silence. Passengers whispered among themselves, speculating about the tension between Marcus and Rachel. Some sympathized with him, while others sided with the crew, creating a divided atmosphere on board. Meanwhile, Rachel retreated to the galley, speaking urgently with the captain about the situation. The decision they made would change the course of the journey and leave a lasting impact on everyone involved. The plane continued its journey across the sky, but the tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Passengers whispered to each other, casting furtive glances at Marcus and Rachel. Some of them felt sorry for Marcus, while others thought he might be exaggerating the situation. But no one could deny that something unusual was happening. The atmosphere had shifted from routine travel to uneasy anticipation. In the galley, Rachel spoke urgently with the captain, her voice low but intense. "He's making calls," she said, gesturing toward Marcus. "I don't know who he's talking to, but this could get out of hand. We need to handle it before it becomes a bigger issue." The captain, a middle-aged man named Kevin Hayes, frowned. "What exactly is going on?" he asked. "You've been dealing with him since takeoff. Is there a reason he's upset?" Rachel hesitated, her confidence wavering for the first time. He wasn't following instructions earlier, and I had to remind him about safety rules. But now, he's accusing me of targeting him because of his race. It's ridiculous. I'm just doing my job. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's how it looked to everyone else? Because if passengers think you're being unfair or worse, it could reflect badly on all of us." Rachel crossed her arms defensively. "I'm not the problem here. He's the one causing trouble." Kevin sighed, rubbing his temples. As much as he wanted to believe Rachel, he couldn't ignore the potential fallout. Airlines lived and died by their reputations, and incidents like this could spiral out of control quickly. If word got out that a passenger felt mistreated, or worse, racially profiled, it would dominate headlines and social media. The last thing Delta needed was another controversy. "Okay," Kevin said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. For everyone's safety and to avoid escalating things, I'm going to divert the plane to Denver. We'll let the authorities sort it out on the ground." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "Divert the plane. Over this. That's extreme." "It's better than risking a bigger scene," Kevin replied firmly. "Trust me, it's the safest option." With that, Kevin made the call to air traffic control, requesting permission to change course. Within minutes, the announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver. Please remain calm, and thank you for your understanding." The news sent ripples through the cabin. Passengers exchanged bewildered looks, murmuring among themselves. Some speculated about mechanical issues or weather problems, while others suspected something more serious. Emily Taylor leaned forward in her seat, her suspicions growing stronger. She glanced at Marcus, who sat rigidly, staring straight ahead. Whatever was happening, it clearly involved him. As the plane descended toward Denver International Airport, reporters waiting on the tarmac began to buzz with excitement. Someone, likely a passenger, had tipped off the media about the unfolding drama. Cameras were set up, microphones tested, and questions prepared. By the time the plane touched down, a small crowd had gathered outside the terminal. When the doors opened, TSA agents boarded the aircraft, flanked by airport security. They moved directly to Marcus's seat, where he sat quietly, gripping the armrests. One of the agents addressed him gently. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" Marcus nodded, his heart racing. "Yes, that's me." "We're here to escort you off the plane," the agent explained. "Can you come with us, please?" Marcus stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in the cabin trained on him. Passengers craned their necks to watch as he walked down the aisle flanked by the two agents. Rachel watched silently from the galley, her face pale and drawn. She knew this wasn't going to end well for her. Outside, the scene was chaotic. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and voices overlapped, in a cacophony of noise. Marcus blinked against the bright lights, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face. "What happened on the plane? Why did they divert the flight?" Before Marcus could respond, Derek Lawson appeared, pushing through the crowd. Tall and commanding, he placed a protective hand on Bob Marcus's shoulder. "That's enough," he said sharply, addressing the reporters. "My client has been through a traumatic experience, and will provide a statement once we've had time to process everything." Derek guided Marcus away from the chaos, leading him into a private conference room at the airport. Inside, he handed Marcus a bottle of water and gave him a reassuring smile. "You did the right thing by calling me," he said. "Now let's focus on getting you safe and figuring out our next steps." Back on the plane, tempers flared. Passengers debated loudly about what had happened, some defending Marcus and others siding with the crew. Linda turned to Gary, shaking her head. It's so obvious what happened here. That poor boy was treated horribly, and now they've dragged him off the plane like he's some kind of criminal. Gary shrugged uncomfortably. Maybe there's more to the story than we know. Emily, still seated near the front of the cabin, decided to speak up. Standing up, she addressed the group around her. I saw part of what happened, she said firmly. That flight attendant singled him out and treated him unfairly. Whether it was intentional or not, it created a hostile environment. And now look where we are, all because she couldn't handle a simple misunderstanding. Her words sparked a heated discussion. Several passengers nodded in agreement, while others argued that Marcus should have followed instructions without question. Rachel, meanwhile, avoided eye contact, retreating further into the galley. She knew she'd made mistakes, but admitting them wasn't easy. Eventually, airport security escorted Rachel off the plane as well. Her departure drew mixed reactions. Some passengers clapped sarcastically, while others simply shook their heads. Once she was gone, the mood in the cabin shifted slightly. People began gathering their belongings, eager to leave the tense environment behind. In the conference room, Marcus tried to process everything that had happened. Derek listened patiently as Marcus recounted the events again, taking notes and offering guidance. This isn't just about you anymore, Derek explained. It's about holding the airline accountable for allowing this kind of behavior to happen. We're going to make sure they understand the impact of their actions. Marcus nodded, though he still felt overwhelmed. Do you think they'll listen? He asked softly. They won't have a choice, Derek replied with a determined smile. Not after today. Outside, the story continued to spread. Videos taken by passengers went viral, showing Rachel's confrontations with Marcus and highlighting the racial undertones of her behavior. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Marcus and or End Racial Profiling, amplifying the incident nationwide. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing passengers and experts alike. Delta Airlines scrambled to respond. In a hastily issued statement, they apologized for the unfortunate incident and promised a full investigation. Behind the scenes, executives debated how to manage the fallout. Suspending Rachel seemed inevitable, but they knew it wouldn't be enough to quell public outrage. For Marcus, the day had been a whirlwind of emotions. From the humiliation of being singled out to the surreal experience of facing reporters and cameras, he felt drained but oddly empowered. With Derek by his side, he realized he had a chance to make a difference, not just for himself, but for others who might face similar situations in the future. As the hours passed, the airport gradually emptied. Passengers retrieved their luggage and headed home or transferred to new flights. But the memory of what had happened lingered, etched into the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. The diversion of Delta Flight 327 would become a turning point, a moment that forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, accountability, and justice in everyday life. The hours following the unscheduled landing in Denver felt like a blur for Marcus. After being escorted off the plane, he found himself in a small, sterile conference room at the airport, sitting across from his Uncle Derek. The noise and chaos outside had faded somewhat, but the weight of what had happened still pressed heavily on him. Derek worked quickly, making calls to Delta Airlines headquarters and local authorities while ensuring Marcus stayed calm. You've done nothing wrong, Derek reminded Marcus gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This is about holding them accountable. They need to understand that treating someone unfairly because of their race isn't just unacceptable, it's unacceptable anywhere, especially on a plane. Marcus nodded, though he still felt uneasy. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, let alone involved in something this big. His hands trembled slightly as he sipped the water Derek had given him. Outside the room, reporters continued to shout questions, their voices muffled by the closed door. Every few minutes, a security guard would walk past, glancing inside briefly before moving on. Meanwhile, back on the plane, tensions remained high among the passengers. Some were frustrated by the delay, while others were more concerned about the incident itself. Linda and Gary, The older couple who had been seated near Marcus couldn't stop talking about it. "I can't believe they treated him like that," Linda said, shaking her head. "It's so wrong. That poor boy didn't deserve any of this." Gary agreed, but added, "Still, I hope they figure out what really happened. Maybe there's more to the story than we know." Emily Taylor, the young businesswoman who had defended Marcus earlier, decided to take matters into her own hands. She pulled out her phone and recorded a short video explaining what she had witnessed. "Hi, everyone," she began, speaking clearly into the camera. "My name is Emily, and I was on Delta Flight 327 today when an innocent teenager named Marcus was singled out and mistreated by a flight attendant. From what I saw, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was blatant discrimination. We need to stand up against this kind of behavior and demand better from our airlines." She posted the video online, tagging major news outlets and using hashtags like #Justice for Marcus and #End Racial Profiling. Within minutes, her post gained traction, shared thousands of times by people outraged by the situation. Comments poured in, ranging from supportive messages for Marcus to angry demands for accountability from Delta Airlines. Back in the conference room, Derek received updates from Delta's legal team. The airline was eager to resolve the matter, quietly, offering compensation to Marcus in exchange for his silence. But Derek refused to accept anything less than a public apology and meaningful action. "My nephew didn't ask for this," he told them firmly over the phone. "He simply wanted to travel safely to visit his grandmother. If you want to avoid further damage to your reputation, you'll do the right thing." Delta's executives knew they were in a difficult position. Videos of the incident, both Emily's recording and clips taken by other passengers, had gone viral, painting the airline in a negative light. Social media users were quick to criticize, pointing out patterns of racial bias within the aviation industry. Calls for boycotts began to circulate, and Delta's stock price dipped slightly as investors grew nervous. Under mounting pressure, the airline issued another statement, this time more detailed. "We deeply regret the experience Mr. Marcus Johnson endured on one of our flights today," the statement read. "Our team is conducting a thorough investigation into the matter, and appropriate disciplinary actions will be taken. We are committed to fostering an inclusive environment for all our passengers and employees." While the statement helped soften some criticism, many felt it wasn't enough. Activists and advocacy groups called for systemic changes, urging Delta to implement mandatory diversity training and stricter policies against racial profiling. Derek joined these voices, appearing on national television to discuss the case. In interviews, he emphasized the importance of addressing not only individual incidents, but also the broader culture that allowed such behavior to occur. For Rachel Dawson, the consequences came swiftly. After being questioned by airport security, she was suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of Delta's internal investigation. Her colleagues rallied around her initially, defending her as a hard-working employee who had simply been doing her job. But as more details emerged, including accounts from multiple passengers describing her harsh tone and dismissive attitude toward Marcus, their support waned. Some even admitted privately that Rachel had always been overly strict, particularly with younger or minority passengers. As the day wore on, Marcus and Derek left the airport, heading to a nearby hotel arranged by Delta. Though exhausted, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay awake in bed, replaying the events of the flight in his mind. Part of him wished he could forget the whole ordeal, but another part knew it was important to speak up. People like him deserved to be treated with respect, no matter where they were or what they looked like. The next morning, Derek accompanied Marcus to a press conference organized by Delta Airlines. The event took place in a large meeting hall at the airport, filled with reporters and cameras. As they walked in, Marcus felt a surge of nerves. This was the first time he would address the public directly, and he wasn't sure what to say. Derek leaned down and whispered, "Just tell your truth. That's all anyone needs to hear." When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady despite his anxiety. "Hi, my name is Marcus Johnson," he began. Yesterday, I got on a plane to visit my grandma in California, excited for my first solo trip. Instead, I ended up feeling humiliated and targeted because of how I look. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. I'm sharing my story because I want airlines, and everyone, to understand that treating people fairly matters. It's not just about rules. It's about respect. His words resonated deeply, earning applause from the audience and praise online. Many praised his courage, calling him an inspiration for standing up against injustice. For Marcus, the attention was overwhelming but validating. He realized that his voice had power, even if it shook sometimes. In the days that followed, Delta announced sweeping changes to its policies. All staff members would undergo mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, and new measures were introduced to ensure complaints were handled fairly and promptly. The airline also pledged to partner with civil rights organizations to promote inclusivity across the industry. Rachel's suspension became permanent after the investigation concluded. While some sympathized with her, arguing that she had simply been enforcing rules, most agreed that her behavior crossed a line. Her dismissal served as a reminder that professionalism and empathy must go hand in hand. For Marcus, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as possible after such a life-changing event. He reunited with his grandmother in Los Angeles, Angeles, who hugged him tightly and told him how proud she was. Back home, his parents celebrated his bravery, encouraging him to keep speaking out whenever he saw injustice. Though the experience had been challenging, Marcus emerged stronger. He learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean you have to face everything alone. With support from loved ones and advocates like Derek, he turned a painful moment into an opportunity for change. And as he boarded another flight weeks later, this time without fear, he knew he had made a difference, not just for himself but for countless others who might follow in his footsteps. In the weeks that followed the incident, Marcus's life began to settle into a new rhythm. The whirlwind of media attention, interviews, and public appearances gradually slowed down, giving him time to process everything that had happened. At first, he felt like a stranger in his own skin, someone who had been thrust into the spotlight without warning. But as the days passed, he started to see himself differently. He wasn't just a teenager anymore. He was someone who had stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. His grandmother, Evelyn, played a big role in helping him adjust. During his stay in Los Angeles, she spent hours listening to him talk about the flight, offering wisdom gained from her own experiences with discrimination. "You know, Marcus," she said one evening as they sat together on her porch, "life doesn't always give us choices about what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we respond. And you chose well." Her words stayed with Marcus, grounding him during moments when he doubted himself. He realized that while he couldn't control how others treated him, he could decide whether to let their actions define him or use them as fuel to grow stronger. Back home in Chicago, Marcus returned to school, where his classmates greeted him with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Some asked questions about the incident, eager to hear his side of the story. Others simply nodded respectfully, acknowledging the courage it took to speak out. His teachers, too, showed their support, inviting him to share his experience during a class discussion on social justice. For Marcus, these small gestures meant a lot. They reminded him that people cared and were willing to listen. Meanwhile, the impact of his story continued to ripple outward. Delta Airlines faced ongoing scrutiny, not only from passengers but also from advocacy groups pushing for greater accountability in the aviation industry. Activists pointed out that Marcus's case was far from unique. Many black travelers had reported similar experiences of being singled out or mistreated by airline staff. Inspired by Marcus's bravery, some came forward with their own stories, sparking a national conversation about racial bias in travel. Delta responded by taking meaningful steps to address these concerns. In addition to implementing diversity training programs, the airline created a hotline for passengers to report incidents of discrimination. They also partnered with civil rights organizations to develop educational materials for employees, emphasizing the importance of treating all passengers with dignity and respect. While some critics argued that these changes were long overdue, others praised Delta for using the incident as an opportunity to lead by example. For Rachel Dawson, the aftermath was less forgiving. After losing her job, she struggled to find employment in the aviation industry. Her reputation had been tarnished, and many viewed her actions on Flight 327 as unforgivable. Friends and former colleagues distanced themselves, leaving her isolated and struggling to make sense of what had gone wrong. In quiet moments, she reflected on her behavior, wondering if she could have handled things differently. Though she never publicly apologized to Marcus, those close to her claimed she regretted the way the situation had unfolded. As for Marcus, he found himself becoming more aware of the world around him. He started paying closer attention to news stories about racial injustice, recognizing patterns he hadn't noticed before. Conversations with Derek deepened his understanding of systemic racism and the work required to dismantle it. Slowly, he began to see himself not just as a victim of unfair treatment, but as part of a larger movement striving for equality. One day, Derek invited Marcus to join him at a community meeting focused on civil rights issues. The room buzzed with energy as activists, lawyers, and everyday citizens discussed ways to combat discrimination in various settings, including schools, workplaces, and public spaces. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he hesitated for a moment, then stepped up to the microphone. "I'm not an expert," he admitted, smiling nervously, "but I've learned that speaking up matters even if your voice shakes. If we want things to change, we can't stay silent when we see something wrong. That's why I told my story, to show people that standing up for yourself isn't just about you. It's about everyone who might face the same thing someday." His words earned applause, inspiring others in the room to share their own experiences. By the end of the meeting, several attendees approached Marcus to thank him for his courage. One woman, a mother of 2 young boys, hugged him tightly. "You're giving hope to kids like mine," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." Though Marcus appreciated the praise, he knew the fight was far from over. Discrimination didn't disappear overnight, and neither did the fear of being targeted again. Still, he refused to let those fears hold him back. With Derek's guidance, he began volunteering with local organizations dedicated to promoting racial equity. He helped organize workshops for students, teaching them how to advocate for themselves and others. He even started a blog, sharing his thoughts on justice and resilience with a growing audience. The media coverage eventually died down, but Marcus's story remained etched in the minds of those who had followed it. Passengers who had been on Flight 327 reached out to him through social media, thanking him for shining a light on an issue they had witnessed firsthand. Linda and Gary, the older couple who had defended him, sent a heartfelt letter expressing their gratitude. "Your strength inspired us to be braver in standing up against injustice," they wrote. "Thank you for reminding us that kindness and fairness matter." Even Emily Taylor, the businesswoman who had recorded the viral video, kept in touch. She became a mentor of sorts, encouraging Marcus to pursue opportunities that aligned with his passion for advocacy. Together, they brainstormed ideas for campaigns aimed at raising awareness about racial profiling in travel. Their collaboration led to partnerships with major airlines, which agreed to feature testimonials from passengers like Marcus in their employee training programs. By the time summer arrived, Marcus felt ready to step onto another plane. This time, he flew to New York to visit Derek, who had arranged for him to speak at a conference on diversity and inclusion. As he boarded the aircraft, memories of the previous flight flickered in his mind, but he pushed them aside. He reminded himself that progress had been made, not just for him but for countless others. During the flight, the cabin crew went out of their way to make him feel welcome. One attendant, a kind woman named Sarah, introduced herself and thanked him for his courage. "Stories like yours help us do better," she said sincerely. "We're learning every day." When the plane landed safely in New York, Marcus felt a sense of closure. He knew challenges lay ahead, but he no longer feared them. Instead, he embraced them as opportunities to keep pushing for change. At the conference, Marcus delivered a powerful speech that left the audience moved and inspired. "I didn't plan to become an advocate," he admitted. "But sometimes life gives you a chance to make a difference. When that happens, don't let fear stop you. Speak up. Stand tall, and trust that your voice can spark change, even in places you least expect. As he stepped off the stage to thunderous applause, Marcus realized he had come full circle. What had started as a routine journey had transformed into a defining moment in his life. He had faced adversity, found his voice, and used it to inspire others. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its ups and downs, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He was ready to keep flying toward a brighter future for himself and for everyone counting on him to lead the way.